What I have to make this check, but when did you finally decide to take on Pelosi? Yeah.
So I first ran for this office in 2018. So February was when I first started thinking about it. We launched the campaign in March for a June 2018 primary. So I was in the 2018 race for 3 months. In those 3 months, without any media attention, we got as many votes as Ocasio-Cortez did in her primary on the same platform, essentially in the same cycle. I was outspent fairly dramatically by some campaigns that had much longer time in the race than I was, and I beat all of those campaigns on the left. I emerged as the leading challenger to Speaker Pelosi from the left, and I'm back in the 2020 cycle to finish the job. We launched this campaign for the 2020 cycle about 6 months ago. And when we launched then, we already were moving. Our ground game was stronger than it ever got in 2018. We've also, in this cycle, raised vastly more support than we did last year. We're at about 5x already. The dollar amount with 10x the number of donors. We're at $250,000 from over 6,500 people around the country. And I still have a year left to build this campaign, so we're just getting started. There's a great deal of momentum that we've established also in, as we're sitting here, it's sharing views with public audiences with, through media opportunities. Having had a chance to be profiled by The Progressive and Mother Jones and the San Francisco Chronicle and Jacobin and Jewish Currents and Current Affairs, we've reached a much larger body of supporters than we ever did last year. And again, with a year left in front of us, I'm very confident that we'll be able to get the word out and mobilize the support that we need in San Francisco to liberate our city's voice in Washington.
Talk about that synthesis of socialism and the best tradition of constitutional liberty in this country.
Yes, thank you for that. I feel like that's an under-regarded intersection. So many contemporary socialists appropriately recognize that the battle against capital is a largely politically economic one, right? And securing rights to basic human needs, healthcare, housing, food, come to mind. And that's a big part of our struggle as socialists, making sure that to the extent there is private capital, that it serves people instead of people serving private capital. But there's a whole other dimension to democratic socialism that cuts in a different direction, and that is the struggle against authoritarianism. That's the D in democratic socialism. And we are aspiring to a brighter future at the very same time that our baseline democratic norms in the United States are fraying at the seams or falling apart. Dramatically, you might say. We talked a little bit about this before when I had a chance to speak with you, but I see lots of different compounding, intersecting threats to our democracy. And I think that as democratic socialists, the very first thing we have to do is defend democracy while we seek to promote socialism. And in my mind, that means, among other things, fighting executive secrecy, fighting the surveillance state that silences Americans, fighting for voting rights to make sure that people can participate in the process, and guarding the independence of the courts as the right wing continues to undermine them.
Can you talk briefly about this terrifying FBI report? We talked to Ken Klippenstein about it, about so-called black identity extremists. I think that precisely exemplifies what you're talking about.
It does. I call that COINTELPRO 2.0. So many Americans have forgotten the first one. I've had an opportunity in colleges, law schools, even among crowds of people who lived through the COINTELPRO abuses, to ask who remembers COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence programs. And it amazes me, for a set of programs that were, when they were exposed, so prolific, how many Americans have just forgotten entirely that for 50 years, the FBI was working aggressively, not just to infiltrate, but to neutralize domestic social groups pursuing baseline civil rights, the end of the war in Vietnam, equal rights for women, rights for Native Americans, independence for Puerto Ricans. Even white supremacists were targeted in COINTELPRO. It didn't even matter what you believed, as long as you believed anything.
Right.
Between the 1940s and the late 1970s, whatever you believed, the FBI was coming after you if the government didn't feel like your vision fit with the established order. And this is in a country with a robust commitment, supposedly, to free speech. We had a First Amendment throughout this process. The laws were written, the words on the paper were there. There just wasn't any meaningful respect for the law. And behind the wall of executive secrecy, surveillance became weaponized. It undermined our democracy. It undermined any number of discrete communities. And just as an example, many people would think of this as a conspiracy theory, and it's horrifying when you realize that we have the documents to prove that the FBI tried to kill Dr. King and drive him to an early death. We have a national holiday and a monument in Washington, D.C. honoring this man that the Bureau tried to take from us. And that was the first time that the FBI criminalized black dissent. And I don't know to what extent it ever stopped, quite frankly, but it certainly is alive and well today. The Bureau actively criminalizes what it calls black identity extremism, and it characterizes black identity extremism as the articulation of equal rights for people and the right not to be shot dead arbitrarily by a cop. And the idea that that makes somebody, I mean, I'm a black identity extremist by that definition. You probably are too.
I mean, literally, I want to like really be clear that you're not being flippant at all. It would be, and I'll be 100% clear. I totally err on, I am, one way in which I'm not trendy is I totally err on the side of, regardless, even if it is the worst, most toxic, disgusting ideology, you do not want to encourage government surveillance unless you're talking about a literal security threat. I don't want the FBI all over the ass of even the worst people in this society. That's not how I want to solve problems. I am with you on the civil libertarian tip. But just to be really clear, to underline what you're saying, they are not saying something, and this would also be utterly ridiculous and need to be fought. But when they say that, they're not saying like, oh, we're harassing some, I don't know, black Israelites or whatever. Which would, again, I have to reiterate, would be absurd and disgusting and also should be rejected. But they are literally saying that black identity extremism is, essentially, is a anti-police violence agenda,
right.
Is a pro-civil rights equity agenda, which in fact absolutely would apply to our politics because we don't want police murdering people of color
randomly,
or anybody for that matter, randomly.
Right.
That's how they're defining it. And that's their writing.
And it's interesting to me that their construction of extremists extend beyond people who share black identity, right? The fact that our movements for justice are intersectional means that the people that are marginalized by this designation by the Bureau are people of all stripes, white folks, brown folks, all the people who have stood in favor of basic due process principles, according to the FBI, are extremists. We are simply standing in line with our stated commitments in our Constitution and our laws. The extremists here are the government agencies that would allow state violence with impunity, the judges who turn a blind eye, and frankly, the policymakers who are unfortunately complicit in allowing violence, state violence, lethal state violence with impunity.
How are all the ways we can help you?
I appreciate that question. A bunch of different ways. So shouting us out online certainly helps. Folks can find us online at Shahid for Change or shahidforchange.us. Contributions certainly help. Speaker Pelosi is the most well-funded corporate fundraiser in the Democratic Party. I am an immigrant with no family legacy. The whole fact that I'm even...
what's the web address? Sorry, we're just putting this up.
No, you got it. Shahidforchange.us. Yeah. There it is. And the idea that I'm even in a position to contend this seat, frankly, to me is very humbling. And I'm very grateful to the support of the 6,500 people around the country who have pooled their resources to challenge the speaker and recognize in our campaign a long overdue voice to represent San Francisco's values. Anybody, anywhere can sign up to volunteer. Folks are supporting our campaign from coast to coast with projects from data entry and social media support to graphic design, video production, phone banking. There's a million ways to help our campaign, whether you live in San Francisco or whether you live in Brooklyn. And
awesome. And tomorrow night,
join us.
Come on, join us. We got to see you there. And again, Nancy Pelosi has directly said that she is going to fight Medicare for all. So there is no, it's fun to get the crown of the corporate establishment, and it's an important race. But this is somebody who has already made clear she's not going to triangulate back if there is a progressive wave.
She wants to impose the pay-go rules on the next administration.
And that means no left agenda. And incidentally, the next wave of no left agenda is what they've done to the courts. And Shahid is one of the only people thinking strategically about that. A lot more of us need to, frankly, follow him in that. So I really want to underline that this is an immensely important race beyond the obvious schadenfreude of defeating somebody like Nancy Pelosi.
Right.
Or obviously also shouts to Michaela Wilkes taking on Steny Hoyer. You two with replacements would be incredible. If you win at your well, first of all,
I'll say when, but I appreciate the question.
Excuse me. When you win, I love it. When you win, expect an invite for everybody in the crew
appreciate
to the party and swearing in.
Right on.
And will you invite Chronix to come perform?
I'll sound with that. That sounds fascinating. Yes.
Vote for him. Help him out. This is really important. You need an army behind. Look, Bernie Sanders elected president. Amazing. It's going to be even more work to fight for the agenda when he wins. We go back to sleep. Some other Democrat is president. You need someone to keep fighting for this actual future we need. Fucking nightmare. Donald Trump is reelected. You can't have Nancy Pelosi saying, I just got off with Bob and he represents a swing state in New Jersey, so we're actually going to open up a new concentration camp in the middle of Manhattan. But don't worry, I'll say Trump is stupid on TV. We need actual leadership here.
Resistance for real, not just a hashtag. Right?
Precisely.
You can have Shahid come in and say, actually, I was just looking through these CIA files on what we're doing in Bolivia, and guys, come on.
Yes.
Knock this off.
If I can press that, there's a reason that Snowden is in exile while Daniel Ellsberg is an international hero. And the difference precisely is that there was a Mike Gravel in the Senate to take Ellsberg's findings and read them into the record and champion truth and transparency. And Snowden had no Gravel. There was nobody in Congress when Snowden came forward who was willing to fight the establishment and guard the truth. And that's why I'm going in there, because we need guardians of the people in the Constitution and Congress. It's why the body's there. And frankly, if we are to fight these battles, I want to make sure that I'm in a position to do everything I can to defend my neighbors. That's why I'm running for this seat.
We got to get you elected to Congress.
You're kind, brother. We're all in this together, not me, us.
Absolutely. Oh, well, we need to get me to 5,000 patrons. So I agree.
There you go.
Yeah, no, we all have goals. I was just emphasizing one of them. Shahid,
so good to be with you.
Thank you so much. Please, everybody, incredibly important race and definitely part of this wider movement. Shahid Buttar.
Thanks for having me, brother.
All right, guys, we're going to take a brief break, and we'll be right back with the Gem and Professor Richard Wolff. You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.